I'm going today to take a walk in the sun and follow my feet to somebody's new mode lawn. I've been having a sweet dream.
We were all writing for the next 20 minutes. And the shelf life that these things have had is astonishing to me. But there was never any intent of having it last any longer than the next blip on the charts.
Hot town, summer in the city, back of my neck getting dirt and gritty.
Between John and Paul and Brian Wilson, something was going to change so drastically in the next 20 minutes that you might be out of the picture.
The diversity created by the many influences that went into 60s music was a major part of what made the period unique.
I grew up in the 1960s, and it was a very rich time because you had music of all different styles, speaking in different voices, but all on the radio at the same time. You assume it's always going to be like that, and then when you get a little older and it goes away, it's only then you realise what exceptional sort of maybe 8 or 9 years we were living through. You know, the springiness of the Motown records and, you know, the rhythmic excitement and the angular nature of Burt Bacharach's melodies, but also the music, say, of the Byrds is also very angular and modern sounding. It's modernist, you know, inside the realms of pop music. People seem to forget that was all happening simultaneously, and if you were a kid, as I was, it's just filling your head with all these possibilities.
For many people, the high point of 60s music came during the second half of the decade.
The middle to the later Beatles to me were like absolutely the best. Clever arrangements, wonderful material, a lot of variances, a lot of different styles. Terrific.
There's nothing you can do that can't be done.
The Beatles developed so quickly that they soon moved light years away from their rock and roll roots and were coming up with songs and arrangements of a kind that had never been heard before.
In 1964, if you had said to anybody, even inside even the musicians themselves, that this was an art form, they'd have laughed. And in 1969, if you said to any of the musicians, this isn't an art form, they'd have hit you. So that's how quickly the whole way that rock and roll saw itself, the way it saw itself, how that changed 180 degrees, really. And there's no other period in popular music, I think, where you can see such a totally radical change in such a short period.
I think we got zapped. I mean, you know, it's the powers that be. So the 60s are it. You know, this is the start of the way music is going to be from now on. All the little nuances and all the little playing and licks that we could possibly drum in, we're going to give it to the 60s. I think that's what the powers that be. We'll give it to the 60s and it'll last forever. Yeah.
Girl, you really got me now. You got me so I can't sleep at night. Yeah, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing. Oh yeah, you really got me now. You got me so I can't sleep at night. You really got me. You really got me. You really got me.
It's the late 60s, And without any warning, rock and roll suddenly leaves the fast lane and slows down to pick up its country cousin. What happened next was one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of pop. By the end of the 60s, rock culture had started to burn out. Fueled by the agonies of the Vietnam War and the extremes of psychedelic drugs, the music became so intense, it was almost painful. It wasn't hard to see that the party was coming to an end, and the first to leave were the same American musicians who helped start it.
We could see it coming. We were aware of what was going on in the streets at the time and the kind of edgy mood that America was in.
What was harmless marijuana smoking in the early 60s had turned into a vicious, homicidal mindset.
Things were starting to spin a bit madly out of control. I think there was just an instinct, and I know it was a healthy instinct, to rein it in.
I have to say that none of these things were conscious. Nobody said, okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to change everything. Now we're going to play a complete different way than what we did before. Nobody ever spoke those words. We just did it naturally. It's what happened. We moved from New York City to upstate New York to this quaint little art colony. The clubhouse effect of having a place out in the middle of nowhere, which in this case was this house called Big Pink.
Up on Cripple Creek, she sends me if I spring a leak. She mends me, I don't have the speed that she defends.
It was just great for getting rid of all the distractions and the atmosphere, too, of having all of this earthiness and nature around and separating yourself from the trendiness and what was happening, you know. I didn't care much about what was happening. I just wanted to do something that I felt was real. We were taking great pride in our musicality. And the music was coming out of us in a combination of all the above. There was gospel flavor to it, there was mountain music, there was Delta music, there was music that I grew up in from the reservation. There was all of these things, and I just kept throwing more stuff into the pot and mixing up this big gumbo. And the nature of the songs that we were writing were not jam session songs. They were precise stories and emotional experiences, and discovering the soul of the music was what was really important. Getting the song across with as much emotion as you could, that was the objective. Not flailing away and blasting the walls down. That had nothing to do with it any longer. When we were recording music from Big Pink, the song The Wait was one of those that I had on the back burner in case we got stuck on something and it just wasn't coming right. I thought, well, I can always spring this one out. When we recorded it and we listened to it, we thought, whoa, this works. And it was a song that we didn't try any other way either. We didn't try it slower or faster or different introduction or a shuffle instead of an eighth note or any of those things. We just played it that way, and it just came so natural. And that was always a good sign.
Take a load off Fanny. Take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. You put the load right on me. Crazy Chester followed me, and he caught me in the fall. He said, I will fix your act if you'll just take Jack, my dog. What did you say? I said, wait a minute, Chester. You know, I'm a peaceful man. He said, that's okay, boy. Won't you be Chester whenever you can? Take a load off Fanny. Take a load for free.
I think the band's first two albums were as important a pair of albums as from any artist. I think they signaled the oncoming of a different level of songwriting, musicianship, and a definition of a band. They were just so mature coming in, which is so against the characterization of most rock and roll bands, ragtag garage bands who were just there for the fun and the women and the money. The band had a much more serious agenda going.
The band were as important a part of this volte-face, of this reaction against very loud psychedelic sort of Fillmore West rock as anybody, and the impact of their first album, Music from Big Pink, was felt all over the world.
And you put the load right on me.
While the band were pioneering a new vision of American roots music on the East Coast, out in the West, the Byrds were also moving on, leaving behind the spacey rock and roll of 8 Miles High. Through the 60s, the Byrds had been at the forefront of folk and acid rock, but as the decade came to a close, they returned to the group's earliest influences.
We'd already known that country influence could work in pop music. We'd heard the Beatles song Act Naturally, and I'd written Mr. Spaceman, which was a 2/4. Hey, Mr. Spaceman, won't you please take me along? I won't do anything wrong. Kind of a countryish sound. And so we started going in that direction, and we decided to do an album in Nashville, and we ended up doing The Sweetheart of the Rodeo.
We didn't turn our back on the rock and roll world. We just took another step into another direction. The country world did not want to know about it, and we're very offended by that record.
When the Byrds arrived in Nashville, America's capital of country music, it was a town still living on faded glories, and at its heart lay the Grand Ole Opry, a music venue dedicated to upholding the traditions of the past.
We were one of the first bands to play the Grand Ole Opry, and it was a very foreign situation for a long-haired, but my hair wasn't really much longer than it is now. But we went to the stage and we got out there and we played a couple of songs and people would yell, "Get a haircut!" What's the matter? Did your barber die?
The bass player we had initially was Chris Etheridge, who had a long black beard and long black hair, and he had this great white suit on. And we were playing, and this guy's back there, this old truck driver, and he goes, "Get back on the cross!"
It was just a cultural thing where the country people didn't accept people who had done pop music. It was just the two worlds didn't connect.
I think we were really genuinely having a good time with the songs.